I'm so excited to share with you guys finally my interview with the author Robert Greene. He's a best-selling author and he has written many amazing books, including The Art of Seduction, The 33 Strategies of War, The 50th Law, Mastery, The Laws of Human Nature, The 48 Laws of Power, and I'm actually really excited to share, he also wrote a book called The Daily Laws. Now, what's interesting is going into this interview, and I want to share this with you guys real fast. There were several things that were interesting. First and foremost, I had some weird feelings and interactions with different parts of Robert's books, and you guys are going to hear a little bit about that behind the scenes as I share my thoughts on his books, how they impacted me. I ask him questions such as, what was your intention with writing this book? What were you like as a teenager? And quite a few more questions. I did not expect how this interview was going to go, but I want to share one thing that's really important with you guys because it kind of blew my mind. So our internet, in fact, Xfinity went down during this interview. Zoom crashed like several times. So you'll notice in certain parts it's pieced together. And after the hour-long slot that we had booked for interview, we have about 30 minutes of that actually was able to be salvaged and used. Robert actually called me back on Facebook Messenger, on Video Messenger, and we had an amazing conversation. So at the end of this interview, I'm going to share with you what was said then, but that was not captured. And so I'll share with you kind of the gist of those conversations, including we finally got to talk about quite possibly his most controversial book, The Laws of Seduction, or rather The Art of Seduction. I think it's really fascinating to talk about his thoughts on that and whether or not he thinks I should read that book. So I could say so much more about him, but first I want you guys to feel free to just watch this interview. Share your thoughts in the comments as we go. You'll also notice my hair is a different color from when I interviewed him to now, but I want to hear from you guys your thoughts. Feel free to share them in the comments, and then at the end of this video I'm going to share with you what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. Hello, hello.
Hello there.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, we finally meet.
Finally, we get to meet. I'm so excited.
Me
Yay!
too, me too.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I was trying to figure out where you're located, but I didn't see it directly in Wikipedia. Where are you located?
Los Angeles.
Amazing.
Where are you?
Minnesota.
Where? Minneapolis?
Pretty close to Minneapolis. We're in Plymouth, just outside of Minneapolis, and
Oh,
we're lifers here. Born, raised, and
oh. Well, I
yeah.
went I went to university in Wisconsin in Madison, and
Oh,
we would take trips. One of our favorite places to go to was Minneapolis, and I had a friend who went to North, what's the no, Carleton College.
yep.
So I'd often
Business management, right?
No, he wasn't. He turned into a musician. So I don't.
Oh,
They had like an arts. It was kind of an artsy school. Anyway, it's
interesting.
in Northfield.
Okay. Okay. I don't get out there ever.
Oh, my favorite part of Minnesota. Just I won't bore you anymore with any of this, but is Boundary Waters.
Okay. Sorry about that. For some reason, our router reset completely, which happens
Oh,
when you have kids on the internet.
oh, okay.
But
That's all
thanks.
right. I thought maybe it was on my end, but no.
Nope, definitely on our end. So, well, I'm super
Okay.
excited. So you said your favorite part of Minnesota is?
Oh, Boundary Waters.
I love that place. My dad
You
used to
meant,
take me there as a kid.
oh, oh God, it's amazing. I have such fond memories of it.
I'm
Yeah.
guessing you went in the fall, right, as all the colors on the trees changed, or not necessarily?
I think we had to go because my sister was visiting me, and I think we went in like September. It was before the leaves were changing.
Okay, it's still pretty.
It's still amazing, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then when the leaves change colors, you look out and it just looks like,
Oh,
especially when you go down the river. So you go down the river and you look and you see, like, it looks like everything's on. I'm excited. All right.
I'm excited too.
I'm so excited. Okay. So before we dive into everything, I actually
Yes.
want to share with you my experience about, or rather with you and your books, because there's an
Uh,
interesting story behind that. Uh, your most, not maybe your most controversial book, but your most well-known book, The 48 Laws of Power, came into my life in a really interesting time. I
Uh-huh.
had, do you know who Russell Brunson of ClickFunnels is? He's an
Of who?
entrepreneur. ClickFunnels?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
So he's from the entrepreneur world and the
Yeah.
more like internet marketer in
Okay.
entrepreneur world. And I actually boxed one of his coaches one night and I was crying and someone had done something really, really particularly cruel to me. And I said, why would anyone ever do anything like that to another person? I don't understand. Can you help me understand why someone would ever do something cruel intentionally to another person? And the
Yeah.
coach said, I have a book that I need you to read.
Uh-huh.
And that was my introduction to your world and your books. And I stayed
What
up all night reading the 48 Laws of Power.
what was it that somebody did to you? Can you
Oh my
share?
gosh. Yeah. So basically they it was on a Facebook post and they were basically taking some of my words and twisting them out of context and making it seem like I was this kind of person that I really am not. But they were intentionally broadcasting it in a way to use it as a marketing angle for them to say like, this
Oh,
is who Rachel is. And it hurt my feelings so badly because they were saying she's overly emotional and she's this and you can't trust someone who's like this. Am I emotional? Yes, but I
yeah.
didn't. A lot of us can be, I think.
Yes.
um but that was my
Probably.
introduction to your book. So
Wow. And it helped you?
so much. It helps me to understand that different people think really differently,
Yeah.
really differently. I'm super curious. Throughout your life,
Yeah.
what was it that made you think about wanting to write books about human behavior, especially the 48 Laws of Power?
Well, it wasn't a simple process. I wish I had like a very easy answer. I was 21 and I decided but it wasn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be a writer from very early on in life. I just couldn't figure out what I could write. I tried journalism in New York. I lived in New York. I didn't really like that. Then wandered around Europe kind of like a hippie and I tried to write novels. That didn't fit. Then I came back to Los Angeles. I got into Hollywood, tried writing screenplays, and that wasn't a good fit either. But in the meantime, I was in my mid to late 30s and I really didn't have much success in life. But I had like 60 different jobs, or at least 60 different jobs over the period. You can everything you could possibly imagine, from construction work to working in a detective agency to working in a hotel in Paris to all the other jobs that I mentioned, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
had seen every kind of awful boss you can imagine and all the kind of conniving colleagues, every kind of political maneuver in all these different jobs. And I read a lot of books about history. And in history, I was reading about the Borgias in 16th century Italy and how kind of evil they could be. And I was going, things are maybe less bloody in 1995, 1996, but they're just as ugly. There's just as many power games going on. People have egos. And so, with that background, in 1995, I met a man in Italy who was a book packager. He asked me if I had an idea for a book, and it wasn't planned or anything. It's one of those moments in life that just happened, by the sun was shining. I was in a good mood. He asked me that question. And I improvised an idea that turned into the 48 Laws of Power. But it all just kind of spewed out of me because I had had so many bad experiences. And I was, searching for what wanted to write. And also, I'm somebody who doesn't really I like realism. I like being practical. And I often write things when I feel a little bit of anger. And what was angering me in that moment was that nobody, I never could see books except for like Machiavelli's The Prince that
Yep.
actually described the world that I was living through. Everything was so sugary and sentimental and all these self help books. And it wasn't my experience. So you put all that together, and that's what created the 48 Laws of Power.
I love that. To give some context then to the experience after reading it, it was really helpful because I was hurt at and not just at that situation, but at the world for just being cruel. And I feel like it was years worth of having seen the ugly underbelly at times of humanity, that
Yeah,
that book actually gave me kind of a roadmap for understanding some of the
yeah,
reasons that people do those things,
yeah.
which was incredible. Go for it.
No, but don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that that's all that there is out there, that there's just
Yeah.
awful people, because really at least 90% of humans are actually decent and easy to get along with. It's just that small percentage of others who are manipulative, who are passive aggressive, who are full of envy, that ruin life for the rest of us that play all of these games. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm this paranoid person who thinks everybody in the world is evil, because I don't.
Mm-hmm. I love that. What were you like before you started writing books as a teenager? What was Robert Greene like as a
Well,
teen?
well, if you search my Instagram, you'll see photos of me from high school where I had hair all the way down my back. I was a
Yep.
bit of a hippie. I was really into literature and books and reading. I read a lot of novels and things like that. I was kind of a, straight A student, but I got into drugs as well. So it was kind of a mix of things. I got, particularly when I went to college, but I also started in high school. I had a period of several years where I was doing, a lot of marijuana and a lot of LSD and other drugs like that. I was exploring. It wasn't a thing of just partying. I wasn't a party person. I'm actually kind of shy, but it was more like I just wanted to know what it meant to be alive, what it
Mm-hmm.
meant to be a conscious human individual. And so I was very curious about things. I was very adventurous. I would try anything.
Yeah.
So that's kind of who I was. I was a mix of kind of opposing qualities, kind of shy and introverted, but at the same time, very adventurous and kind of hungry for all kinds of interesting experiences. And I did all sorts of weird things that I would never do now, hitchhiking into Mexico and things like that and stuff. But, that's when you're 18 years old, that's what you do.
I will say, as a mom of three, that terrifies me.
You're
That
a
really
mom, you're a mom,
terrifies me.
you have three kids,
I do. Yes.
but you're so young.
Well, you're so nice. Thank you very much. Yeah, I
I
have
would
an
never,
11.
I would never have thought that.
Well, thanks. I started young, not necessarily on purpose, but
No.
yeah, I have an 11-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well,
oh, go ahead.
I'm not advocating that, young people do drugs, but don't get me wrong, because it could be a terrible thing. And I understand the dangers involved. You just
Yep.
asked me the question. I was being honest with you.
I appreciate honesty a lot. So, I have some interesting questions. A lot of my questions are specifically about 48 Laws of Power, mostly
Certainly.
because every time I talk about it, people go crazy. Like they have so many thoughts. I mean, they assume so many things. And so one question I actually asked my audience, if in many different ways, if you got to sit down with Robert Greene, what would you ask him? And one of the questions that came up the most, but I almost want to rephrase it, is is 48 Laws of Power a book for narcissists to learn how to be narcissists? But I'm going to rephrase that because I truly don't believe that the people who behave like that need a book, if that makes sense.
I
So,
completely agree.
so my question for you is, what was your intention as you wrote this book? Like, what were you hoping people might say about it, or what their experience would be?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there was part of the intention was I was a bit angry that nobody was really writing about the world that I'd experienced. So I wanted a little bit of revenge. I wanted to actually put it out there. So maybe I'm being a little bit dramatic with the stories to kind of create that sense of drama, like I'm reacting against it. But the other thing is, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
People who are sharks, who are the real manipulators out there, and we all know who they are, they don't need a book like the 48 Laws of Power, right? It's already in them. They know it. They have that. It's in their DNA. We could trace back when they were 3 or 4 years old, and I do that in the Laws of Human Nature, my previous book, where that comes from, right? What
Yes.
creates that kind of person. But let's just accept that they exist. They
Mhm.
don't need the book. They've been practicing it since they were toddlers. how to manipulate, right?
True.
Okay. So I wrote the book from my point of view. I was somebody at that age, 35, 36, who had no real power. I was never a CEO. I never was like a boss of anybody, right?
Mhm.
I had been on the end of other people doing things to me. So there's one law in the book that is on the face very evil, which is get others to do the work, but always take the credit.
Mhm.
And that had happened to me in several occasions in Hollywood. Like I wrote like big bits of dialogue in the screenplay. I really literally almost wrote the screenplay, but my name was never on it. And that kind of gives you a kind of pissed me off, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I later realized that that's just how life is, and you have to find ways to deal with it. So a lot of the laws of power had been done to me. I hadn't been doing them to others. And then never outshine the master, law number one, which is sometimes you try too hard to please people who are your boss, and you don't realize they have an ego and they have insecurities, and you're
Mhm.
making them feel insecure inadvertently by trying so hard, like maybe you're better than they are, and then you end up being fired and you don't know why. That happened to me on several occasions. So I wrote the book from that perspective, more of the victim, and I wanted to help people in these situations because you enter life generally and you're a bit naive. I was very naive, I have to admit, when I entered the work world at the age of 21 or so, right? I had
Yep.
all these silly notions in my head from university, et cetera. And I was blindsided by all these games, like kind of the game that somebody played on you on Facebook. I wasn't expecting it. And I would get emotional and I would get upset and I would say stupid things and I would make the situation worse. So I honestly wanted to write a book that would be for me when I was 21. I wish I had had that book. It would save me some of the pain of all of these dramas and help me center myself and realize what's really going on.
I love that. Because reading your book, that one in particular, was the first time that I started to realize, hey, I don't even have to recognize a lot of the games that go on in the workplace. So interesting. Over the years, if you could go back, and actually I'm going to include all of your books. I have read all of your books except for The Art of Seduction, and we'll maybe talk about that more at some
You
point.
probably don't need The Art of Seduction, I'm assuming.
Okay.
But anyway.
I will say though, it's mentioned in The Game, right? And I read a part
Definitely.
of The Game. Not many people do this, but I like to read books that really go counter to what I either currently believe or what I've previously believed. I really like to read books like that. Do you do that too?
Sometimes I think that's very wise and very smart. I should probably do that more often.
It
Right.
it helps. Sometimes I'll think of not necessarily celebrities, but I'll think of people who I don't like their online persona or their public facing persona, and I'll
Right.
intentionally read their books to try to find common ground or understand something that
That's
I
brilliant. That's brilliant. I completely applaud that. It's something I don't really do enough of. I think so. Was that sort of my online presence that you didn't like, and that's why you read my books? Okay.
nope. I only read it. When I boxed my coach, I was crying. And she said, "Oh, Rachel," she said, basically, "you are a lot like Minnie Mouse," which is really nice. She said, "You're just so naive sometimes. And so I'm going to recommend this book to you." She said,
Wow.
she said, "It might feel a little dark, but I think this is going to really help you to understand why other people make the decisions that they make at times,
Okay.
because I don't think that," she said, "I don't think you normally naturally wrap your brain around it." And I think that was actually, I knew nothing about you. I actually envisioned you very different. When I was reading the book, I was like, oh, this is an evil, horrible person. And then actually, once I found your online persona, I realized you're actually really nice. Like, you are a kind person. And I got that, at least in
Yeah.
many scenarios. No one's absolute.
No.
So that was the first time I started reading books that went against my natural to become a better business owner. So I'm glad I did at least that first time. So I would still read The Art of Seduction just to understand it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Especially raising daughters, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, well, and a son too. So as you look at all of your books,
Yeah.
is there anything that you look back at and say, not that you regret writing it, but your perspective has totally shifted completely? Is there anything that stands out to you there, a particular law or chapter?
Well, not really. I'm somebody who tries to live in the present. I never reread my books or anything like that. I think The Art of Seduction, maybe there are a few things in there that I would change. Like I use the word victim. I talk about seducing your victim. That's a
Yeah.
very loaded word in our currently. I mean, it always has been, but so I would maybe change the language. And there's a particular chapter in that book
Mhm.
that is quite dastardly, if I won't use the word evil, but quite dastardly, which is about isolating the person that you're going to
Yeah.
seduce. I didn't mean it that way. I meant it in a more literary way, but it could be taken, could be misconstrued. Maybe I would change that.
Mhm.
But basically, I live in the moment. I'm
Yeah.
on to my next book, and when I look at the book as a whole, like I say, power. I feel personally, I don't want to sound arrogant, but I feel like I kind of nailed it. I kind of nailed what the game is like.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's some things that have changed now with social media, things I might change a little bit. With seduction, yeah, there may be things that are a little too harsh in it, but I nailed the psychology behind seduction, why we're so vulnerable to it, and what makes, and what the positive aspect of seduction. And I definitely believe there is a positive aspect. And I can go on and on down the list of the books. Yeah, maybe here and there I could tweak things, but to me at least, I captured the essence of the phenomenon.
Mm, that's so good. I was going to ask, um, well, actually, I'm still going to ask when you feel like the laws of power could be used for and a lot of different things. It could be used for good. It could be used for evil or dastardly purposes. Really, the truth is that's how every single law is. Um, Rather, an interesting twist on that is, how do you think people prevent themselves from getting to a place where power can become all consuming?
Well, that's sort of what I wrote the book Mastery, believe it or not, about. Mastery was my fifth book. It came out in 2014. And I was really concerned that people were taking the 48 laws of power too seriously. That a lot of my readers, at least initially, were young men predominantly, like in the 18 to 25-year-old
Mm,
demographic, and a lot of women, but mostly younger people. And I was a little bit concerned that they were becoming too consumed, that they thought that all that success meant in life was learning how to be political and learning how to manipulate. And I don't have that opinion either. So I wrote Mastery as a way to say, you want to be able to get outside of yourself. You want to not be
mhm,
so consumed with your own feelings, your own insecurities, your own weirdness, and you want to put your attention into your work, right?
yeah.
Or into other people or into your project. You want to be able to get outside of yourself in some way. And I know for me, I have aspects of myself that are honestly quite neurotic, quite insecure. But when I am writing my books, I'm another person. It takes me out of all of my problems. It absorbs me in something outside of myself. So
Mm,
the best way to escape the kind of narcissistic trap that you can have if all you
yeah.
care about is getting attention and manipulating people and having power in this world is to absorb yourself in something outside of you, in a cause that animates you. And there's plenty of causes in this world that should animate you, in people that you love that are around you, and your children and your spouse and your colleagues, and develop high level empathy, which is the theme of my last book, Laws of Human Nature,
Mhm,
or in your work. So in my last book, I call this the healthy narcissist, right? The
mhm,
healthy narcissist, because we are all self absorbed. And I really try and argue against the notion that only some people are narcissists. Every
Yes.
human being on this planet is a narcissist, including myself. We are all
Mhm.
to some degree self-absorbed. Some people are worse than others, of course, right? But
Yeah.
to become a healthy narcissist, you have to turn that attention that is always directed inward about yourself and your what attention you're getting and whether people are recognizing you, and turn it outward into the world. And that kind of love that you feel for yourself, you put into
Mhm.
people, you put into your work, you put into a cause or a project. That to me is the kind of cure, the remedy for too much obsession over power, I think.
Mm. I love that. And that actually makes me want to ask, in the laws of human nature, what's your favorite law?
Well, have you read the book?
Hmm.
You have? Okay, I'm sorry. You've frozen, so I can't see you so well.
Yes, I
Um,
did.
okay. Um, well, my favorite law, I mean, it kind of shifts, but I have to say the law about your attitude towards life. So,
Mhm.
because it's a fascinating subject, I have this
Yes.
idea that in 50, 60, 100 years, there's a whole element of now I'm just seeing a picture of you. Oh, well, can you hear
I'm
me?
still here. I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Because now you're enveloped in darkness. Oh, well. Um, I had this idea that there's this whole sense of the power that you have with your attitude. And it's nothing people have, you can't really demonstrate it
Yeah.
scientifically, but it's insanely powerful. And someday I want to see science kind of tackle this so that people can understand it. But the idea is that you have a particular way of looking at the world.
Hmm.
It's what I call your attitude. Some of it comes from genetics. It comes from how you were born, whether you're an
Yeah.
introvert, whether you're an extrovert. A lot of it comes from your earliest years, your experience with your parents, etc. But it's like a lens that you see things. Some people are very open and excited and adventurous, and everything they see in the world seems like a possible adventure. Other people
Yes.
are very closed and very nervous and very anxious, and everything they see in the world reminds them of some possible something to fear, some anxiety, right? And it's you projecting this on the world. The two people are seeing the same thing, but one sees it through the lens of anxiety, the other sees it through the lens of adventure. And I want the reason the chapter is so important is you can control your attitude. You
Hmm.
can change it. It's not easy. You can't change it overnight. But I want you to go through a process where you become aware of what your attitude is and go through these certain exercises that I give you in that chapter for
Hmm.
altering it. But to give you an idea of why I'm so excited by that idea is there are things where if I met you, Rachel, for the first time, and I approached you at a party or whatever, or a bar or whatever, and I'm like very interested in you. I'm very excited about you. And you can sense that I'm open. It kind of creates that feeling in you, right? A kind of viral
Yeah.
feeling because we're very vulnerable to the emotions of others. If I go up to you and I'm kind of nervous and closed and I don't really like you and you can sense it, you can smell it off me, or that I may be ambivalent, it makes you defensive and insecure. So you're not aware of the fact that you're going around in life kind of creating people's reactions to you by your own attitude, by how you look at them, right? And it goes back and forth and back and forth. So if you come up to me and I'm kind of defensive and anxious, it makes you defensive and anxious. And then I, who'm already defensive and anxious, it makes me even more, oh, she's like that. I think everybody is like that. On and on and on it goes. And we create this own kind of vicious circle of our own attitudes, kind of reinforcing them. So if you understand that going up to people with a thought in your head of, I like this person. I kind of respect them. They're an individual with their own values and experiences. You create this, and you don't even have to say it, you just think it. You create this kind of nonverbal communication between you that alters the
Yeah.
dynamic and makes everything so much more pleasant and so much more exciting and human. So to me, it's an area that I could write books about. It's extremely important chapter.
So this is the part where my internet cut out again, only this time our entire modem, internal and external, shut down. And I was so bummed because we were on the final question. I waited to see what would happen. We tried to restart it, nothing happened. But Robert basically called me back on Facebook Messenger video, and we had probably another 20 or even 30-minute long conversation beyond the time when the interview was supposed to end. One of the first things that Robert really asked me about was this idea of why is it that I didn't want to read the book, The Art of Seduction? And I shared with him very candidly that I heard about the book, The Art of Seduction, in relation to a book called The Game by Neil Strauss, which is a game all about pickup. If you haven't heard of pickup before, feel free to look it up. Just a heads up, it's kind of gross. I personally learned about the game and the world of pickup in relation to people's behavior towards me when people would come up to me and feel the need to like criticize or insult me in front of a group before even saying hello. And I didn't understand that behavior until a mentor of mine said, I suggest you read this book so you understand that a little bit more. Now that I understand it, it actually really helps me to see that behavior. And now when people neg in my presence, it's an instant no. You're out of my circle. You're not going to be a part of my life because I see that behavior and it is not acceptable. So Robert actually said, I'm really curious, like, would you ever read The Art of Seduction? And I said, I'm going to be honest with you. Here's why I wouldn't read it. And he said, I want to be clear. The book, The Art of Seduction, was never about the same process as the game. It was never meant to be about pickup. It was rather for people who really struggled with connecting with significant others. And we talked a little bit about it. And one of the things I appreciated that he shared was that he kind of didn't like that he had said in that book, The Art of Seduction, that he mentioned the victim and that he mentioned getting them alone. And we talked a little more about it in this part of the conversation. He said, knowing the world that we live in, those were probably not the best choice of words, but he doesn't regret anything in The Art of Seduction. But he said, he asked a little bit about my life, asked about kind of what my life looks like. And I shared with him that I'm married and that I have 3 kids. And he basically said that he actually recommends that I don't read the book. So take all of that with a grain of salt, which is really interesting. Overall, my conversation with Robert, despite the tech challenges, felt very gracious. It felt very kind. We've had follow-up conversations briefly since then, and both of us left the conversation feeling like, wow, it was kind of like we understood each other. I got the sense from this interview that he was someone in life who had been potentially taken advantage of people, and that overall he has a kind outlook towards the world. At least that's what I got from it. He wants to truly help people. For example, when as mentioned in the interview earlier, when people were taking the 48 Laws of Power too seriously, he felt the need to write the laws of human nature in order to kind of counteract it. And I thought that was really beautiful. So that being said, I would definitely read more from Robert Greene, but I wanted to share something from his newest book called The Daily Laws, which is a New York Times best-selling book. This is Robert Greene's The Daily Laws. Now, what's funny about this book is I love flipping to whatever the date is. For example, the day of recording this is November 8th. And I love to look at this and kind of see like almost like a daily horoscope. I wasn't allowed to read horoscopes growing up, so I'd always just read the daily passage from any book. Wow, this is so spot on for today. Okay, so this is why I love this. I love acting like whatever is written on that date is what was meant for that day, and that's what I'm feeling here. November 8th is Supreme Patience. Time is an artificial concept that we ourselves have created to make the limitlessness of eternity and the universe more bearable, more human. Since we have constructed the concept of time, we were also able to mold it to some degree to play tricks with it. The time of a child is long and slow, with vast expanses. The time of an adult whizzes by frighteningly fast. Time then depends on perception, which we know can be willfully altered. This is the first thing to understand in mastering the art of timing. And it goes on. And it says, daily law, practice patience, wait a day before taking action on that pressing problem. And this one comes from the 48 Laws of Power. It's Law 35. What I really enjoy about this book is that it is a compilation of the laws from the different books. And I shared this with Robert. What I think is helpful about this, I will tell you guys that 48 Laws of Power really did help me in a time where I didn't understand why people would just be mean, like actively, intentionally, willfully mean to another person. That's something I've never understood in my life. And 48 Laws of Power was an amazing opportunity for me to realize, I'm getting emotional talking about it, that is just a part of some humans' decisions. That is just a part of some people's way of being in this world. And if I want to make it through this life without becoming, or rather continuing to stay in this state of victimhood, I need to recognize, and many of us need to recognize, wow, this is the behavior that they're intentionally inflicting on others. And once you start to see the patterns, it's a lot easier to get out of it. I've spent a lot of my life in rather abusive relationships from my childhood to relationships after that, and I don't open up about that very much. And so it was really, really powerful for me being able to read the 48 Laws of Power and see so many of the patterns of my childhood and of my past in one place. And it really, really helped me to understand, like, I don't have to let people treat me that way. And I'm emotional because I'm looking back and seeing that book was a huge turning point for me in recognizing it's not okay to talk to me that way. It's not okay to treat me that way. That book actually really helped me, believe it or not, to create some really strong boundaries. And so for that reason, and for many other reasons, I'm so grateful to Robert for writing it and giving me actually a roadmap of what to avoid from people who are sociopathic to psychopathic to narcissistic to Machiavellian. Like, all of those things are things that I don't want in my life. And it was helpful to realize that many of his books are not just for the people who already are good at those things, but rather for those of us who need to empower ourselves with that knowledge to make different decisions. So I purchased the Daily Laws. I'm going to have to recommend this one 10 out of 10. I also think this one is so much easier for people to read one page at a time, because every day's page is only one page, I'm pretty sure. Maybe some of them are 2 pages, but they're all pretty short. So instead of having to read all of the books, you can go day by day. You could put it in your bathroom. You could put it on your nightstand and read one page at a time. No, I have not made any money from promoting Robert Greene's books or this interview at all. This is for me a huge thank you to a master who truly wrote about something that supported me and served me in my life. So Robert Greene, thank you so much for writing these books and for helping me and so many others to know how to navigate many different behaviors in life, including those who are obsessed with power. If you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to my channel. I'll catch you guys later. Bye for now.